Hello, Steve Art 79. I've had a bit of good news about Babylon 5, I guess. I wasn't the biggest fan of Babylon 5. I was a Star Trek man, and I was a bit of a Star Trek stan, frankly. I was really no better than the Drekkies of today, where I hated everything but Star Trek and trashed everything but Star Trek and wouldn't watch it or anything. Later on, I evolved a little, and I pretty much went out and watched every other science fiction show there was, just for the sake of it. And I did kind of like Babylon 5. I'll get into that a little bit after this. Basically, they have announced, finally, officially, that there is a reboot being developed at the CW. It's actually happening. The writer, Mr. My God, I can't remember his name. J.M. Straczynski, which I think I've been saying wrong all these years, has pretty much announced it. It's official. There was a description that was put online. It said, and this is of the new show, in a from-the-ground-up reboot of the original series, John Sheridan, an Earth Force officer with a mysterious background, is assigned to Babylon 5, a 5-mile-long space station in neutral space, a port of call for travellers, smugglers, corporate explorers, and alien diplomats. At a time of uneasy peace and the constant threat of war, his arrival triggers a destiny beyond anything he could have imagined, as an exploratory Earth company accidentally triggers a conflict with a civilization a million years ahead of us, putting Sheridan and the rest of the B5 crew in the line of fire as the last best hope for survival of the human race. So it pretty much sounds like the original show, which is no surprise. And Mr. God, I'm just going to say JMS, because I'm not sure how exactly to say his name, and I've been saying it wrong all these years. Now I actually look at how it's spelt. There'd been rumours for years that they were going to do a reboot, and you can never tell if there's real rumours or if fans just want it to happen and are just talking about it like they think this should happen, so, it must be happening. They just make up their own sort of stories. He said that it was never going to happen, that the studio had said they had no intention of doing anything in terms of television with Babylon 5, and no Kickstarter or anything would pay for it, and basically that this wouldn't change for years until those execs are dead or gone, basically. So it looks like they're dead or gone because it's happening. And in response to all of this, he wrote a very long, very long response to basically the news coming out. I think I'll read it out. To answer all the questions, yes, it's true. Babylon 5 is in active development as a series at the CW. We have some serious fans over at the network, and they're eager to see this show happen. I'm hip deep in writing the pilot now, and we'll be running the series upon pickup. The network understands the uniqueness of Babylon 5 and is giving me a great deal of latitude with the storytelling. As noted in the announcement, this is a reboot from the ground up rather than a continuation for several reasons. He goes into some mythology. You cannot step in the same river twice, for the river has changed and you have changed. In the years since B5, I've done a ton of other TV shows and movies, adding an equal number of tools to my toolbox, all of which I can bring to bear on one single question. If I were creating Babylon 5 today for the first time, knowing what I know now as a writer, and what would it look like? How would it use all the storytelling tools and technology resources available in 2021 that were not at hand then? How can it be used to reflect the world in which we live and the questions we are asking and confronting every day? Fans regularly point out how prescient, I don't know what that word is, the show was and is in our current world. It would be fun to take a shot at looking further down the road, so we would not be retelling the same story in the same way because of what that philosopher said. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that. Who this guy said about the river. There would be no fun and no surprise. Better to go the way of Westworld or Battlestar Galactica, speaking Battlefield Earth, where you take the original elements that are evergreen and you put them in a blender with a ton of new challenging ideas and create something fresh yet familiar. To those asking why not just do a continuation for a network series like this, it can't be done because over half of our cast I think have passed. He says they are still stubbornly on the other side of the rim, so I'm not quite, I think that means they've died, because I know a lot of the cast members have died. How do you telling continual continuous stories of our original characters, basically, without the actors. So he's just going into a lot of detail there, which I'm not going to read out. The original Babylon 5 was ridiculously innovative, the first to use CGI to create ships and characters, and among the very first to shoot widescreen and have a 5.1 mix. Most of all, for the first time, Babylon 5 introduced viewers accustomed to episodic television to the concept of a 5-year arc with a pre-planned beginning, middle, and end, creating a brand new paradigm for television storytelling, and has subsequently become the norm. That tradition, I kind of think he ruined television, actually. That tradition of innovation will continue in this newer iteration, and I hope to create additional forms of new storytelling that will further push the television medium to the edge of what's possible. Let me conclude by just saying how supportive and enthusiastic everyone at the CW has been and is being with this project. They understand the unique position Babylon 5 occupies both in television and with this allegiance of fans, and we're doing everything we can to ensure the maximum of creative freedom, a new story that will bring in new viewers while honouring what has come before. Onward. So yeah. Interesting. I mean, it's a lot of shows that were redone, like Battlestar Galactica, they were done a long time after the original one. You can look at the 70s one and the noughties ones, and they're so different. Whereas Babylon 5 doesn't seem like it was done that long ago. I know it was 1994, I think. 1995 was after Babylon 5. After Deep Space Nine. It was a long time after, it's been a long time. But I was looking at it, it doesn't feel that old. I don't feel like a new show is going to be that different. Now, there are a lot of issues with the remastering because there was some drama. They were talking a while ago about doing a reboot, and then just turned out to be a remastering of the original show. Because the original show was filmed on widescreen, and then the effects were done full frame. It was shown full frame on TV, but then when they put it on DVD, they scanned the original film and made it widescreen, but then the original effects weren't done in widescreen, so they had to push in on them, and cropping in closer just made the detail worse, and they looked a lot worse than they did on the original show. Now, having redone it, they've remastered it in its full frame version, so they're cropping the edges off the original widescreen shots, but they're using the full frame digital shots, so they look a bit better, and they've been remastered fairly well, so the detail and everything looks a lot better. But you're watching it in full frame when you've gotten used to watching it widescreen. So I wasn't really happy with either. I didn't like the DVD on one level because the effects were a mess, and I was hoping they would spend money on redoing the effects, so you'd have a nice widescreen quality show. Just update the effects like they did with the original Star Trek. It would have been great. It should have been easy to just insert them in because it was all done digitally back in the day. But apparently that was an issue, and then now they've done them in full screen, and I don't want to buy the full screen ones because I don't want to watch them in full screen even though the effects will look better. Because I know I'm missing the sides, so I'm not really happy. In the original show, I watched it only a couple of years ago, and I did marathon the whole thing, and I'd always heard this big going on about how it was designed as a 5-year arc, and it was unique and special and never been done before, and blah, blah, blah. And then I watched it, and the show was cancelled in the 4th year, and they rushed the end, and then they got a 5th season after all, and then they just made up a bunch of stories to fill out the last year. So it didn't really hold to the 5-year arc that was so legendary about this show. It attempted it, and I guess it was unique, but Twin Peaks, I think, did it first, but Twin Peaks, wasn't planned as a 5-year thing. So it wasn't the first show to tell an ongoing story, is what I mean. But I don't know, I kind of liked it. I appreciate it for what it was, but it had a lot of issues, partly because I watched it, so many decades later, it was dated. But it still held up in a lot of ways. So the idea of the same person doing it again today with better technology and, a better knowledge of what, people expect, and just the improvement in TV overall is interesting. I think he could do a really good job of it. Unlike someone else redoing someone else's work, this is like Gene Roddenberry doing Next Generation. He basically took his original show and made a better, newer version set 100 years from the original. That worked. So if he does something like that, but I guess he doesn't have to shift the time because he's not doing a continuation in the same universe, I think it could be really good and really interesting. But will he get 5 years? will he have to do season arcs because they won't give him 5 years and have an overall arc? Like, how will he design it? Did he have a commitment for the 5 years from the original show? Did he go into it just hoping that would happen? I don't know. It's interesting. But I'm happy for the Babylon 5 fans. I'm not going to say anything negative, even though I do think Deep Space Nine was better. And for years I was saying that Babylon 5 copied Deep Space Nine. It's not true. Deep Space Nine was in development on some level for years before the news that Babylon 5 was going to be produced pushed them into actually producing the show, so they would be first. That's fine. That's not copying. But yeah, I'm going to go. It'll be interesting. I still want a proper remastered version of the original in widescreen with new effects, but I don't know if that's going to happen. Maybe if this does really well, they'll put the money in for that. I don't know. I'm going to go. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you think. I'm feeling more optimistic than the other reboots.